some of the smaller producers, it's just not viable for them to have a physical space. So yeah, that's why I wanted to open this shop, to have a space where you could come across the hidden gems, the ones that you can't normally get, as well as the famous ones and the interesting wines that the more established producers make as well.
Hey everybody, it is Dani Valent here with you for an episode of Dirty Linen. Dirty Linen is on the road in the Grampians Wimmera and Mallee, and what a great time I am having in this beautiful part of Western Victoria, just a few hours west of Melbourne. So good to be out on the road and to be chatting to my guests in situ. For today's episode, I am at Grampians Cellar with Simon Freeman. I've encountered Simon at the Royal Mail in Dunkeld and at Bray in Birregurra, and it is wonderful to find him here at his little wine shop. Simon, welcome to Dirty Linen.
Dani, it's great to be able to welcome you here into my little space. It's very different from previous times when I've been wandering around in a suit pretending to look important, and now you get to see me in my own environment, so it's really great to be able to welcome you here.
Oh, it's such a thrill to be here, and I feel like this is my environment too, surrounded by lots and lots of wine. It's really, it feels like a very promising scenario. But this isn't an ordinary shop. I mean, the view out the window, I mean, we're not at Chatty, are we? Like, set the scene for us.
Well, we're in a pretty special space. We're right in the middle of Halls Gap, but just set off the main street, so it's a little bit quieter when town does get very busy. I'm very lucky to have a little corner block with some of the most amazing views in Halls Gap, looking up towards the Pinnacle Lookout, where a lot of visitors spend their days hiking up, and then they come back down into town and they can sit out on the deck, basically just look up at the people standing at the Pinnacle Lookout, and thinking that they've just done that themselves. So yeah, surrounded by amazing landscapes, and a beautiful, peaceful spot with shade from the trees. So yeah, it's a lovely spot to sit out and have a glass of wine, and plenty of local wines to come into the shop and take away as well.
It's so great. I really love it, and I'm blown away by this view. If I'm not looking at you, I'm going to be looking at the mountain because it's so spectacular.
Well, I do find it quite hard to actually get on with invoices and boring paperwork when I find myself just staring out of the window sometimes and just watching the world go by.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, I'd love to hear how you come to be here. You were working at the Royal Mail. It's probably where we first met many years ago when Dan Hunter was there. Yep. And then you moved over to Bray when he opened up in Birregurra. But now we find you here in Halls Gap. Tell us the journey. Well,
it is a pretty simple journey, basically. I'd moved over here from England a few years before being in Dunkeld. We lived over in Western Australia for a few years in Margaret River, and then basically by luck and chance ended up working with Dan in Dunkeld at the Royal Mail, actually through a mutual connection of ours in London. That's how I ended up there. So that was fortuitous, and basically started a journey for me with Dan. I've had an amazing time down in Birregurra working at Bray. I was there for the first 5 years that Dan was open there, and it was a really life-changing experience for me. I felt like we achieved some really amazing things, and it was really the pinnacle of a long career working in hospitality. And then as time progressed, my wife and I decided we wanted to start a family, and it was pretty clear to me that I didn't feel I could do Bray to the full extent of my abilities and be the kind of parent that I wanted to be. So after a bit of soul searching and chatting and talking, we decided that I'd have to move on from Bray. And also after nearly 20 years of working in hospitality, I did feel like a break would be quite nice. My wife and I tried to decide where to position ourselves, where to settle, and her family's in Western Australia, my family's in the UK. We'd lived in those places and decided probably not the best spot for us, but we just had this really strong connection to the Grampians. We'd loved our time in Dunkeld, and even when we were living in Birregurra, we spent a lot of our spare time coming back to the Grampians. And we realised that this was a special place for us. We had such great connections, friends, and the community here is so strong that we said, okay, let's try and move up here. And then it was a question of, what do I do? Don't have a clear path. There wasn't really anywhere in the area that I wanted to work. So it was like, okay, what kind of establishment can I open? And then it quickly dawned on me that if I was to open another restaurant or cafe or something using the experience that I had, I'd probably get sucked into doing really long hours and pulling myself away from the family lifestyle that I'd envisaged. So then I kind of fell back on an idea that I'd had, more than 10 years previously. When we were living in Dunkeld, we would often come up to the Grampians on days off, up to Halls Gap, and it used to blow me away how there was so little representation of the local wine. As we were talking earlier, the Grampians is a fantastic wine region, but it's not massively well known. And I just couldn't believe that in Halls Gap, which is kind of the heart of the wine region, a lot of the really interesting wines that are made here, you couldn't buy them in Halls Gap. You could go to the supermarket and buy Best Spin 1 and Mount Langley Billy Shiraz and a few others, but there wasn't a lot of the smaller producers who are making really interesting wines. And I knew that these wines existed because we had them on the wine list down in Dunkeld, and I knew a lot of the winemakers. So this kind of seed was planted in my head that, there should be a little wine shop or wine bar in Halls Gap showcasing these things. So I'd had the idea many years ago, and then when we decided to move back up here, I kind of allowed that seed to grow and to flourish, and looked at a few properties, tried to find something. Nothing felt just right, and then basically the property that we're in now, some friends of ours were in the process of building and opening these little shops, and I looked at the plans and kind of saw it and basically jumped on the corner block and said, can I have that one? And so we waited for that to be built. Unfortunately, the building was finished. I was given the keys the day before the first COVID lockdown, which was not great timing, but it did mean that things were a little bit difficult for the first few years coming in and out of lockdowns. And it hasn't been the smoothest ride for the past 5 years, opening and owning a small business. But we've had bushfires and we've had lots of other things to contend with. But here I am in my own little space where I get to do what I love doing, which is chatting to people about wine and talking to people and sharing stories, but in an environment that's a little bit less stressful than running one of the best restaurants in the country, and also slightly more favourable hours. Getting to spend as much time at home with our 2 young kids now. It's a kind of, it's a way of me being able to do what I love doing and providing a service to visitors to the area, but also to locals. It's become a real hotspot for locals to have somewhere nice to come and have a drink on a Friday night. And I feel very privileged to have made my dream come true. Like I say, it hasn't always been easy, but we're in a position now where hopefully moving forwards, the business can grow and we can continue on.
Wow, what a story. It's great. Like it is so good. And I mean, I love, how intentional it was for you to step away from hospitality, but then to still obviously stay connected with one of the parts of it that you're so passionate about. And very much hear you that it hasn't been an easy run. I don't know if small business ever is, but the past years have been particularly challenging. And then, to have the fires in this region, this summer just gone, it's like, when's there going to be the good year? I bet you ask yourself.
Absolutely. We did say that we were going to write off 2024 as a really, really hard year. We had bushfires. We live up the road in Pomona, and we had bushfires basically rip our small town to pieces, which was really, really brutal. So we thought that 2024 was the kind of bottom of how far we could go and how low it could get, and then unfortunately 2025 hasn't started much better. So we're almost writing 2025 off, or the start of 2025 anyway, and we're looking forward to the future, because it's definitely been tough, but looking on the bright side in both occasions, both the Pomona fires and the Halls Gap fires, there weren't any casualties and loss of life, and in this big fire that we've just had, huge scale, 130,000 hectares, massive fire and very little property loss this time. So we're very, very grateful that it did look at certain points that Halls Gap could be in real danger. The whole town was under pretty severe threat. So we're definitely looking on the bright side that as bad as the fire was, it could have been a lot worse. So yeah, we're very grateful that sitting here now, you look out the window and you can't even tell that there was a fire creeping onto the doorsteps of the town. And yeah, we are very lucky that this amazing town and the views and the landscape around it were unaffected by the fires directly.
Yeah, it's a pretty chilling story, but it's hard. It is hard to connect with that part of it when it's just such a sparkly autumn day and just so beautiful outside. Simon, tell us a bit about Halls Gap and how you've seen it change over the years.
It's an amazing town, and a lot of people from all over the country, but especially from Melbourne, they've got memories of Halls Gap, of visiting Halls Gap on school camps or family holidays. It's got that reputation of a place where you'd go as a kid and you'd be brought here. A lot of people have continued coming through the years and have brought the next generation and the next generation of families along. But yeah, I've seen a huge change in the past 10 or 15 years since I first lived in Dunkeld and used to come up here. It was always a very busy town in the busy times, but very sleepy and quiet in the winter. The winter, you could be on the high street on a Saturday and you might not see any cars on the road at all. And it had that caravan park and campsite kind of feel to it. There was lolly shops and souvenir shops and pubs, and that was kind of it, the odd cafe. And it kind of felt like it was stuck in a bygone time of like an old-fashioned Australian tourist town. In the past 10 or 15 years, especially the past 10 years, we've really seen it kind of change and almost catch up a little bit with the times. New operators have moved to the town and just given it a new lease of life, a new identity almost. So things like the caravan parks, a couple of them have been taken over, and the standards of the facilities and the pools and the bathrooms is just so good now that you feel like you're staying in a resort. We've got a great little microbrewery. We've got a few hospitality venues that have been taken over by people with energy and have just given a new lease of life. So we've got a huge range, and the standards have got so much better. You can come here and get a coffee as good as you can get in Melbourne. You can come here, and yes, it's still limited to a certain extent. It's a small country town, and there's only a full-time population of around 700 people, so it does fluctuate massively, and it is very much a tourist town. So yeah, things do get really busy when it's busy, and it does get quieter in winter. But now throughout the year, there's people around. There's really nice opportunities for people to come and stay in a little Airbnb or the nicer campsites with cabins and glamping and all of these options that you can come and stay throughout the year, and not just in the summer holidays.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I think we should talk about wine. It's definitely the place to do it. So, I mean, we can come here and taste wine from the region. There's also some of the wineries have got cellar doors, not all of them. But what would you like people to know about the Grampians as a wine region?
Well, it's an incredibly historic wine region. It's, as we were talking about earlier, it's not the most well-known of wine regions in Victoria. It often gets overshadowed by its kind of slightly more glamorous regions that surround Melbourne, like the Yarra Valley and Mornington Peninsula, and even some of the further afield ones, places like Rutherglen, which again have got amazing histories. But yeah, we have some of the oldest vines in the world, in the country, in the world, here, dating back to the original gold rush times of the 1860s. So yeah, it's a really historic wine region. And I think a lot of people who do know the Grampians, they know it for that. They know it for places like Best's out in Great Western, which have these incredible old vineyards. We've seen a real boom in the past 20 years that kind of mirrors what we were just talking about Halls Gap, of smaller producers coming to the area and doing some interesting things. So in addition to those historic old vineyards, there's a number of small producers who either grow grapes themselves or buy grapes from established growers and are making some really, really interesting wine. So I feel like there's this new generation that's really kind of flourished in the past 20 years, say. A few examples, a few favourites, people like Rory from the Story Wines. He makes the wines in Melbourne, but the majority of the wines he makes are from fruit sourced in the Grampians. And he's been doing that for over 20 years now. And he is one of the people who I often refer back to when I say why I opened this shop, because I met Rory when I was working in Dunkeld and I tasted his wines and just thought this guy's a real talented, passionate young winemaker. But you can't buy his wines in the Grampians. He's based in Melbourne. He doesn't have a cellar door here where you can try the wines. And I just couldn't believe that there wasn't a place where, and a lot of the locals didn't know about it. So yeah, it was a reason for me to kind of open the doors here to showcase not just those historic and famous wineries, but also the smaller ones. So yeah, as a rough approximation, there's about 13 cellar doors that are open, but there's more than double that of producers who make wines every year in the Grampians. So yeah, less than half of the wineries actually have a place you can visit. And the main reason for that is the scale of the region. It's quite a spread out wine region. It's very different to somewhere like the Yarra Valley or the Barossa Valley, where you can drive along a road and go past 2, 3, 4 wineries in a couple of kilometres. Here there's a winery located just outside of Halls Gap, and then there's a few wineries out in Great Western, and there's some on the northern edge and some on the eastern edge, but you can drive an hour in between wineries. So it doesn't have the same wine tourism feel that some of the other wine regions do. And for that reason, some of the smaller producers, it's just not viable for them to have a physical space. So yeah, that's why I wanted to open this shop, to have a space where you could come across the hidden gems, the ones that you can't normally get, as well as the famous ones and the interesting wines that the more established producers make as well.
Given the distance between those wineries and the variation in the geography and topography around here, is there a characteristic Grampian style, or does it vary a lot from place to place? That's
a really good question, and it's something that people often think of the Grampians for Shiraz. The Grampian Shiraz is the thing that often comes to people's mind. But yeah, you're completely correct. There's such a variety of little microclimates within it. So we're kind of, to keep it simple, we're classed as a moderate climate for wine in this area. So we're not as hot as places like the Barossa Valley or Heathcote, but we're warmer than the coastal areas like Mornington and Yarra. So we kind of fall somewhere in between, and that's kind of where our wine style falls as well. So we're not looking at really big, heavy, powerful, knock your socks off, like blockbuster style Shirazes. I kind of describe the Grampians Shiraz style as a little bit more medium to full-bodied in style, but a little bit more elegant, less about power and more about elegance. So that's the variety that we're most associated with. But we've again seen this real shift in recent years to other varieties, interesting varieties that traditionally might not have been grown here. We're moving away from grape varieties that are maybe not ideal. So grapes like Pinot Noir, it's a little bit too warm here, and a lot of people have just moved away from it. It's not perfect for the region, so let's look at grapes that are actually really well suited. So people are planting things like Grenache, which historically people didn't grow here because they thought it wasn't warm enough. Now with a little slightly warming climate, we can ripen Grenache consistently, but we make this really bright, fruit-driven, juicy style of Grenache that is an amazing alternative to Pinot Noir for a light red wine, and very different to the Grenaches in the warmer parts of Australia like the McLaren Vale, but it's got its own identity. So yeah, we're seeing this kind of shift in styles from the traditional Grampian Shiraz, that's what we're known for, to seeing, actually there's some grape varieties that work really well here. Another one like Viognier, for example, a great white grape that's really well suited to this region, but it's not quite as popular traditionally as grapes like Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. So we've seen people starting to plant these slightly less popular grapes, but ones that are actually really well suited, and move away from the grapes that we can do, but we just don't do them as well as other regions.
Yeah, you might as well not just be pushing it uphill to force a grape into a region. I think Grenache is, I don't know if a comeback is the right word, but I think it's, I'm certainly seeing it around a little bit more, and I think even as a chilled red it can work so nicely.
Absolutely, and we've got a couple of producers who are doing that style, that kind of nouveau style, where they're not aging the Grenache in oak, and that just basically means it's super juicy. Like, it's all about the fruit, and that just works so well chilled. So yeah, funnily enough, got one in the fridge and on the wine by the glass list at the moment, because it's just a perfect warm afternoon sitting out there in the sunshine red wine. You don't have to have it super cold, but yeah, just refreshing and fruity and just tasty. Not tannic, not dry, not designed to go with a big piece of meat. It's just there to drink and enjoy on its own. Yeah,
I love it. And Viognier as well, like when it's well made, such a beautiful, full-bodied, rich wine. It's just, super delicious. And
absolutely.
Great with... Yeah, great. Well, I mean, what would you eat with Viognier?
Well, it's a really interesting style, and again, it can vary from producer to producer in terms of how they treat it. So, if you want to, you can make a really rich, luxurious style with Viognier. If you age it almost like a Chardonnay, you age it in oak barrels, and you play around with it to make a really rich, luxurious style, and then you're looking at things like roast chicken and it's fish with a creamy sauce or richer sauce, or you can make a really fresher, fruitier style, which is kind of like lots of apricots and tropical fruits, and then you can start playing around with Asian foods or spicy foods. If it's got that really tropical fruit character or fruit-driven character, stone fruits more than tropical, but that goes really well with a little bit of like gentle spice, like a really mild curry. Works really well. But it is quite a versatile grape, and I think again it's got a bit of a reputation that people remember bad Viogniers from 10 or 20 years ago. It's a little bit like Riesling. Riesling's kind of shaken a lot of that bad reputation that it had of the bad Rieslings of 20 years ago that people still remember and they still reference. But I think nowadays people know that Riesling is much more than those sickly sweet Germanic styles that flooded our shelves, the Blue Nuns and the like of those. And we make a really unique, dry, crisp, citrus-driven style in Australia, and Riesling's our main white grape here in the Grampians. But I don't think Viogniers quite managed to shake that reputation yet. So it does sometimes need a little bit more work in talking to people and selling it, because there's lots of different styles of Viognier. So just because you've had one Viognier in the past that you don't like, it doesn't mean you don't like Viognier necessarily. It just means that maybe that overripe style is one you want to avoid, and there's alternatives. Yeah,
we can try to get over the Viognier crimes. So, Simon, I think a shop like this, you create community in all kinds of different layers. There's a community of people who come here perhaps from the town and are able to find a sense of pride in the wine that's grown nearby. Is there also a sense of community that you've created among the winemakers?
Absolutely. I think a lot of the smaller producers are really happy to have somewhere that showcases their wine for them. We have a big wine festival each year, which is coming up at the start of May, the Grampians Grape Escape, and it's an amazing festival, and a lot of the smaller producers will have a stand and will be showcasing their wines, and that's often where people get to meet and get to discover these wines. But I wanted to have a place where those wines were available throughout the year. For those winemakers, they love the fact that they can, when people say, where can we taste your wines? They say, just go down to Simon's. And it's officially called Grampians Wine Cellar, but a lot of the locals and the local winemakers just refer to it as Simon's. People go down to Simon and then he'll have a few wines on by the glass that you can try. And they also, a lot of the winemakers come in here because they're like, there's somewhere down the road where we can buy some interesting wines. So yeah, the shop's basically split in half. Half of the wines is from the Grampians and its surrounding districts. So I include wines from Henty, which is anything south of here, and the Pyrenees, which is anything east of here. So Western Victorian, basically, mainly Grampians, but Western Victorian. And then the other side of the shop is interesting wines from around Australia and international. And a lot of those wines I've had on wine lists over the years, producers that I've become friends with, winemakers that I've visited in this country and overseas. And each of the wines on that side of the shop I have a connection to for some reason, so I get to kind of continue telling all of the stories about these wines that I've got stored in my head. I get to have an outlet to share all of those stories, which for me is fantastic. And the majority of my sales is definitely the local stuff. It's about 80% of the wines I sell are from the area, because that's what most people are looking for. When they go to an area, they want to try something local. But a lot of the winemakers, they come in and they're like, oh, I'm having a bit of a Nebbiolo phase at the moment, and they'll pick out some interesting bits from Italy and from around Australia, and they get to come in and pick out a handful of wines and go home and try them. So I do love that as an added benefit to the local winemakers, is they get to not only show off their wines, but they get to come in and pick up some interesting ones.
Simon, you touched briefly on Grampians Grape Escape. It is such a draw to the region at the start of May, a real gathering of winemakers and people who are interested in tasting it. Tell us about what it's like as a visitor event.
It is without doubt one of my favourite weekends of the year. It's just such a fun event in town, and it started off, the roots of it were very simple. The local winemakers wanted to increase awareness of their wine, so they started out on the footy oval in Halls Gap, and they'd have little stalls and you could come along and taste the wines and then take some away. It's so much more than that now. It's become, it's more of a family festival rather than just a wine festival now. So you've got a whole range of different producers there, so not just wineries, but beer makers, gin distilleries, local cheese makers, and all of the food trucks you can imagine, and amazing music, amazing facilities for kids. They do such a good job making it an all-round event that it's just a really, really fun time. And set on the football oval in Halls Gap, which is one of the most picturesque footy ovals in actually I should go back. It's a cricket oval rather than a footy oval. People do play footy there, but it's more of a cricket oval. Set on the cricket oval in Halls Gap. The backdrop is absolutely stunning. You're surrounded by the mountains, and the weekend festival starts on the Friday. They have an evening event on the Friday night, live music, and a few of the stalls are open, so you can go and buy some drinks and just have a little party. And then the Saturday is the bigger day. A lot of people who come up. Some people come for the whole weekend, some people come for one day, and Saturdays tends to be the slightly busier one. There's great master classes on, and a few things to do that just provide a lot more depth to it than just going around and tasting wines. And then on the Sunday, it's a little bit more of a relaxed feel on the Sunday. A lot of the locals go on the Sunday because it's just a little bit more chilled, and not quite as busy. And again, live music throughout the day, and just a really nice, fun way to kind of finish off the weekend.
So good, such a good showcase of the region, and a great excuse to get over here. But of course, there's no bad time to come to Halls Gap and the Grampians.
No, absolutely. And as I was saying earlier, we've changed so much from a town where you'd only come for the peak weekends or the peak times. It's really got so much to offer outside of that. So there's amazing places to stay. You can book a little Airbnb with a fireplace and a jacuzzi on the deck, and make the most of winter, and come and stay here when it's cold and grey, because it's really beautiful even when the weather's not as perfect as it is today. I sit looking out of the window here when the mountains just kind of roll in and out of the clouds, and it's really beautiful in its own right throughout throughout the colder months of the year as well. So yeah, there's so much to offer, and most of the businesses are open throughout the year now, so you can come on a weekend in the middle of winter and still have a great selection of places to eat and drink. And a lot of the wineries are open a few of the wineries open 7 days. Some of them are only open around the weekend. So it does tend to be a bit quieter midweek in winter, and there's not as many visitors, and therefore there's not as many businesses open. But especially on the weekends, everyone's open and everyone's here to welcome people in.
Love it. Well, you've set up a bit of a Grampians grape escape here at Grampians Wine Cellar with some wine tasting. We've got a couple of whites and a couple of reds sitting in front of me, and I mean, I would love to know what we're doing.
I thought I'd just show you a few of my favourite wines from the area and just kind of showcase what the Grampians is all about. So a couple of whites. First of all, a little Riesling. Now, Riesling is kind of what we've been made most well known for in the Grampians for white wines. This one's a little bit different because it's a little bit older, so 2015. For me, Old Riesling is one of the most undervalued white wines in Australia. When Riesling gets older, it gets a little bit more texture on the mouth. It's kind of like almost slightly oily or waxy on the mouth. It stays dry. People think that, you'll see it's got a bit more of a golden colour. People think that means it might be a little bit sweeter, but it's not. It's still really citrus, lime, peel kind of flavours. But with that mouthfeel, it just kind of coats your mouth, and then that means the flavour just goes on for longer. So yeah, this is from one of the wineries that unfortunately is no longer available. It's a winery called ATR Wines, which unfortunately closed a few years ago. It's now got new owners who are hoping to get things back up and running again over the next couple of years, because it's a really spectacular vineyard. And yeah, this is from his museum release. Basically, when he sold up, he let me access some of his older stock. So yeah, it's just I like to showcase this because I think in general we do drink Riesling when it's young and crisp and dry in Australia, but I like to pull out some of these older bottles occasionally just to say this is what Riesling can be if we give it a little bit of time. So yeah, this was originally, it was a $25 bottle of Riesling. It wasn't a spectacular, like a world-beating Riesling in its youth in its own right, but you see the kind of development it has over 10 years and the complexity it has now. Yeah, I do often say to people, if you've got a little bit of space and you love Riesling and you love older Riesling, just put some of this Grampians Riesling aside, because it can become pretty special, pretty unique after 5, 10, 15 years in the bottle.
Yeah, well, it's delicious is one word that I'll begin with, but there is a lot of freshness still in the mouth, and the length is quite extraordinary.
Absolutely, yeah. The acidity, which we're known for in Riesling in this area and places like the Clare Valley, that kind of piercing kind of citrus acidity, that stays, that doesn't really diminish over time, especially in a good Riesling. So yeah, that you've still got that amazing crisp dry finish, but yeah, with that extra kind of richness, almost like lime marmalade rather than kind of fresh lime on the palate. That kind of slightly richer kind of character to it, but the freshness just keeps it really really clean and really interesting on the finish.
Yeah, it makes me think of a dried orange slice with the sun shining through it.
Amazing.
Okay, what have we got coming up next?
Up next, we mentioned a little bit earlier, Viognier. As I said, Viognier for me is a grape that we should do really well in Australia. So basically, Viognier comes from a part of France, the Rhone Valley, the northern Rhone Valley, which is the home of Shiraz or Syrah. So theoretically, we have exactly this. We're a Shiraz growing region. We have exactly the right conditions, soil and climate to grow Viognier. This is from one of the small producers in the area, and again, one of my absolute favourites, called Sub Rosa. It is a side project of a gentleman called Adam Lauder, who's the head winemaker at Mount Langy-Guerin. Mount Langy-Guerin is one of the more famous wineries in the Grampians, established in the early 1970s and home to some of the best Shiraz in Australia. So yeah, this is their head winemaker, but it's a side project that he does with his wife. Tiny production. They only make a few wines, Shiraz, Viognier, Nebbiolo, and sometimes a rosé and a couple of other little ones, but we're talking a few hundred cases of total production. So I think there's about 100 cases of the Viognier made, and it's fruit from Mount Langy's vineyard. He saw the fruit there and basically asked the owners or the bosses if he would be able to buy a little bit of fruit one year, several years ago, and make it into a wine. And it's now become one of the highlights of the region for white wine. So this is like the style I mentioned earlier, where he's gone all out with this one. It's all about hedonism. It's a richer style. It's aged in new French oak, and it's made into a style that is luxurious. Viognier, you have to be a little bit careful. If you pick the grapes a little bit late, it can get a little bit perfumey, a little bit overblown with those kind of floral characteristics. So Adam's really, really careful to make sure that the grapes are not picked too ripe. But then what he does is he builds all this complexity into the wine with the winemaking, things like the oak aging and the stirring of the wine on its lees. So what that does is that builds richness and complexity, but it's maintained that great acid line as well. So it's finishing fresh, but it reminds me of a really great Chardonnay of some of the French Burgundian styles. It's like that in the fact that it's rich and luxurious at first, but then you get this freshness coming through at the end that you don't feel like it's like a big overblown fat white wine. It's still clean and fresh.
It's clean was the word that came to mind. It's super, like, it is really buttery and it's got that breadth, but then it does finish really clean, almost a little like mineral, I don't know, limestone chalk, like a slight chalkiness, like a salinity.
Absolutely. And that's found in the Shiraz in at Mount Anguigouan in the same vineyard. So it makes sense that that's coming through these old vines through the soil into the wine. So it makes complete sense.
Very beautiful. We are going red now, Simon.
Okay, so we'll have a couple of little reds. And again, I thought I'd show you one of the wines that we've already talked about. So this is a chilled red. This is a Grenache made by, again, one of the small up-and-coming winemakers in the area. The label's called Black and Ginger. It's a young winemaker called Hayden Black. And again, one of the real up-and-coming stars in the area, and a lot of the locals and people who visited Grape Escape will have met Hayden and his wife Lucy, and they're really well integrated into the local wine scene here now. This is he calls it Grenache Nouveau. So basically a little play on the French wine called Beaujolais Nouveau, where the idea is you press the grapes, you ferment the juice, and then it goes straight in the bottle and it's drunk straight away. It's drunk young, it can be drunk chilled. You can absolutely drink this wine at room temperature and it's delicious, but it's made to be drunk within a year or so of being made. Super juicy, super fruit driven, and as we said earlier, on a hot day or a warm day, sitting out in the sunshine at a barbecue or picnic, this is the kind of red wine that I love to drink throughout the summer months. I can't drink a lot of Shiraz when it's 35 degrees outside.
Well, I know that would definitely not last a year at my place. That is so drinkable, so lighthearted, fun, delicious, very juicy. I'm thinking like red peppers on the barbecue, maybe some kind of grilled meat in a taco, something. Yeah, I reckon it can handle a bit of flavour.
I reckon any food that you can eat in your hands, that wine goes with.
That's it.
So a slice of pizza, taco, and anything that you can just pick up and eat. Yeah, it's... for me, a great example of how wine has changed over recent decades in Australia and the world. Wine doesn't have to be serious. Wine doesn't have to be, it definitely doesn't have to be pretentious. It's about fun. You go to Europe and wine is poured at the table and it just enhances a family gathering. It brings friends together. And when you break it down to just that, wine's about fun, and this is just a perfect example of it. You're never going to sit and analyse this wine. You're not going to break it down and try and talk about the vintage characteristics or anything else. It's just delicious, and sometimes that's all wine needs to be. I do love sitting and breaking down a wine and analysing it and talking about all the interesting, boring wine nerdy stuff sometimes, but a lot of the time I just want to crack a bottle and have a tasty glass and have a conversation with my friends about whatever's going on in their lives, rather than having to kind of talk about the wine constantly.
Yeah, perfect. Wine for doing life.
Wine for life.
That's the category. So Simon, we've got the last tasty little number. What have we got?
Okay, so I thought it would be remiss of me not to show you a Grampians Shiraz, the grape that we're most famous for. This is from a producer I've mentioned already, the Story Wine. So a gentleman called Rory Lane, and as I say, one of my introductions to the smaller producers in the Grampians. And this is a little single vineyard Shiraz, or he goes by the French name for this one, Syrah, rather than Shiraz, from a vineyard that he manages out in Moyston. So basically just a little bit up the road on the way back to Melbourne. You almost drive past this vineyard, but it's kind of hidden away. You don't really know that it's there. It's a vineyard where he made his first wine from this vineyard over 20 years ago. And then unfortunately, the current owners of the vineyard signed a contract with one of the bigger wineries, and they sold all their grapes to them for a long period of time. And then it came up again recently, and Rory jumped on the chance to get access to the fruit, and the way he managed to do it was convincing the owners to let him manage the vineyard himself, so they didn't have to do all the hard work. So he looks after all of the viticulture himself. He's converted it back to organics, and spent a lot of time in the vineyard working with the soil and the vines. It's called the Moyston Hills Vineyard, this is the Story Wine's Moyston Hills Syrah. So the thing I love about this is what I'd describe as a modern Australian Shiraz or Syrah. It's not about power, it's not about 16% alcohol and how much flavour and richness can we get in the bottle. It's much more mellow, it's much more elegant in style. Lots of dark fruits, that little bit of pepper, black pepper, and almost a hint of white pepper in there as well. But it's drinkable on its own. It's not a wine that you need to have alongside a big steak. It's not the kind of wine where you have one glass of it and don't want to go back. And for me, that's a really good example of how Shiraz is changing in Australia. We were for a long time known around the world as making these big, heavy, knock your socks off styles, and now some people are still making those wines, and there is still a demand for those wines. And I have some wines on the shelf where if that's the style that you like, I can say, oh, you should try this winemaker because he's loves that style too, and that's what he does. He picks the grapes really ripe, and then he leaves it in oak for 2 years, and it's all about trying to get as much flavour into the bottle as possible. But then you can have a wine like this where it is more of an everyday wine. It's a wine that you can enjoy on its own or with food, and it's just a little bit more balanced, a little bit more approachable.
Yeah, and it's really a jaunty little number, I would say, and I could really imagine drinking this over a few days as my cooking tipple.
Just to have a glass.
Yeah, just a glass, and it's got a lot of body and structure, but it doesn't. Yeah, as you say, it doesn't knock your socks off, doesn't push you sideways. A bit more beguiling. Absolutely,
and I think it's something we always talk about with white wine is the acidity and the freshness on the finish, but it often gets forgotten about with red wines. That acidity is really crucial. It makes your mouth water, and it makes you want to go back for more. So those big heavy reds where the grapes have been picked really ripe, basically the acidity level is usually lower, and therefore your mouth gets filled with all of these flavours, and it kind of lingers and kind of stays in your mouth. A wine like this, with where the grapes are picked a little bit earlier, has slightly higher acidity. What it does is it cleans your mouth, it refreshes your mouth with all of these bursts of berries and fruit. So you want to go back for another sip, and you want to go back for another sip. So it's really important in red wine, and for me, it's what makes a wine quaffable and enjoyable to drink on its own. You need to have that acidity level, and it's really important in reds as much as it is in whites.
Love it. So, Simon, I know it's been hard for you to choose some favourite children for this little mini Grampians grape escape. And maybe I'm going to ask you another hard question, which is, got to choose somewhere to eat tonight. What are some of your faves in town?
That is a really good question. There are a really good selection of places to eat now, and we are lucky that there are a variety you can choose from. A few favourites. There's 3 good, what I'd call kind of pub food style options. There's the Kookaburra Hotel, which is just outside our window, which has been there for 40 years. So a lot of people will have come and visited that in the past. It's had new owners in the past few years who, as I mentioned earlier, they've just given it a new lease of life. They've got rid of the contract with the big name Melbourne brewery and brought in some independent craft brewers, and they've put the pool table back in and put good music on, and they've just given it a new lease of life. And there's the Halls Gap Hotel just outside of town, and Barney's Bistro up in Pomona, just up the road. Again, new owners in recent months have just given it a new lease of life. So 3 really good options, all serving traditional Australian pub food, but to a very high standard. But then in addition to that, just down the road from me, a couple of doors down, is Raccolto, which is just really good wood-fired pizza. I'm very lucky to have them there, because basically you can sit out on my deck and order food with them, whether it's a bowl of olives or they do an amazing baked cheese with honey and ciabatta, which is a focaccia, which is just a really great little wine snack, or pizzas. So yeah, really good, simple wood-fired pizza. One of the places that the locals will often recommend, if you ask for a recommendation for where to go to eat, is the Spirit of Punjab. We have one of the most amazing Indian restaurants in Australia, in town. A really incredible Punjabi family run it, and it's an institution in Halls Gap. Now, we know people they've got customers who come up from Melbourne to eat there specifically. That's why they're in Halls Gap. It's really authentic Punjabi food. It's about as kitsch and as crazy as you could possibly imagine. They have robot waiters, if that gives you an indication of just how fun it is in there, and amazing statues and lights, and it's a feast for the senses in all respects, but just beautiful, well cooked Punjabi food. So yeah, I'd really recommend that one. We've got the brewery, Rock Paper Scissors, that do amazing beers and great food alongside it. And there's Flame Brothers, which is American style barbecue, kind of brisket kind of style things as well. So yeah, there's lots of options. If I had to choose one of them, that's a tough one. I can't. Yeah.
You are making my choice extremely difficult. They all sound like excellent recommendations, and I suppose what I'm getting from this whole conversation is that there are so many reasons to visit the area and to revisit it and to make it part of an annual tradition. Such a great part of the world. Simon, thank you so much for sharing with me today on Dirty Linen. It is excellent to finally have you on the show. Really, love your passion for the region and what you're bringing to it, adding to these layers of what's making Halls Gap and the Grampians region such a great place to visit.
Well, thank you so much for including me on your trip. It's there is so much going on in this area, and there is so many interesting things to do. So yeah, I'm really grateful that you decided to stop in and make me part of your trip. So thank you very much.
Thank you. This episode is part of a special Dirty Linen series about the Grampians, Wimmera and Mallee regions in Western Victoria. We drove the roads, saw the sights, said hello to the roos and emus, met the people, ate the food, drank the wine, and generally soaked up the delights. Listen to more episodes about the Grampians Wimmera Mallee. We hope you'll plan a trip to the region and maybe listen to stories of this fun, fascinating part of the world as you travel. This series is supported by Visit Victoria.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.